small root cause resolutions that reverse women's hair loss naturally. I am your host, Surreal Vasquez, a multi-certified functional medicine practitioner that is obsessed with reversing hair loss naturally. And as the CEO and founder of Belcanics, we bring you this summit to share our vision of a world where hopeless hair loss is the thing of the past, and every woman has the opportunity to break through her limiting beliefs while embodying a new truth that will set her free. And that truth is hair loss is reversible. Today, I am welcoming Dr. Christian Gerch. Dr. Gerch is a dedicated physician specializing in functional longevity medicine. He's based in Germany, and he provides world-class longevity care to English-speaking expats living across Europe who come to his centrally located practice for personalized treatment. While he works with only a select number of patients in person, his book, Can 20s Longevity Medicine Make You Age Like Methuselah, allows him to share his expertise with a global audience. And although Dr. Christian Gerch is not with me live on this talk today, he has very generously agreed to record a video for us on the benefits of fasting. Yes, fasting with hair loss. Normally people think when you fast, it's bad for your hair and it's going to cause more hair loss and thinning. And so he's going to delve into what that looks like. And he's also going to talk about some diet approaches when it comes to hair loss and regrowing hair as well.
Today, we want to talk about hair loss, fasting, and what a perfect diet is being composed of. Now, a lot of people think a fast is very healthy. And I agree with that. I'm actually a big fan of fasting myself. I fast every quarter for 5 days. And either we teach our patients and they practice what we call a fasting mimicking diet, based on Walter Longo's research, but a bit modified to make it easier and more successful to conduct. But I personally, you should only do that if you're like really advanced. I usually do this as a water fast only. And this is the way I think fasting has two advantages when it comes to longevity. Now, when I talk about fasting, a lot of our patients on the practice usually say, yes, I am experienced in fasting. But when you really ask them, what do? They do intermittent fasting. And that is a big difference to true fasting. And today I would like to kind of tell you the difference, and especially tell you when it comes to your gut health, your skin health, your hair health, where is this difference coming from? So in general, when we talk about the benefits of a short-term fast, meaning not eating overnight, and yes, we actually ask all our patients, with a few exceptions, to have like a 13-hour fasting window overnight to not eat. But what is the two difference to a longer-term fast? Now, your body has a few essential nutrients. It always needs certain vitamins and minerals, and it needs specific fatty acids, and it needs protein, but it doesn't need that much as carbohydrates. Now, we do have a very good storage of fatty acids, obviously, and we have some storage for carbohydrates. What our body cannot store, really good, is vitamins, minerals, and protein. So when you go on a fast and when you stop eating, your body can easily live off the calories stored in your adipose tissue. But when you do not eat any exogenous protein, you would basically have to die. And because your body is built to survive, to not die, when you don't get any exogenous protein for roughly about 36 hours, and this number is important, then a process kicks in which is called autophagy. Autophagy is the Greek word for eating the self. And now some cells which have a sign holding up like I'm not necessary anymore, are being recycled by the body. They release their protein and your body can live on this protein for a couple of days. Now, there are fasting regimes where people fast like 10, 14 days, but that's usually not a good idea because the protein reserve to live on autophagy is good for about maybe 5 or 6 days, but not a lot longer. And after longer periods, then muscle tissue, for example, is being attacked and you don't want to go there. This is why we suggest limiting a longer term fast to 5 days, because this is where the sweet spot lies. But most people actually say, okay, I'm only going to do like a 16-8 or an 18-4 fast or whatever. And they think this would trigger autophagy. But usually this is not the case. What an overnight fast or 16-8 fast, whatever does is, if you have been eating too many carbohydrates and your liver is basically more than full and has a short-term storage for carbohydrates called glycogen. This glycogen storage is good for about roughly 24 hours for going without any carbohydrates. And if this storage is overfull, then your liver starts to make fatty acids out of that. You get fatty liver disease, you get insulin resistance, all this stuff, which you do not want to get. So the 2 cents of shorter term fast is basically to purge all the glycogen from your liver until you get back to baseline, and then you can start eating again. But this is not about protein, because your body is not going to run out of protein when you fast for 12 or 18 hours. What happens instead is that you just try to get back to the baseline where you have started regarding the amount of carbohydrates, because most people are actually getting too many carbohydrates in their diet. And we're later going to talk about what is a good diet looking like. But in general, for most women, actually some carbohydrates are good. If a woman is being stressed too much, then a lot in her hormone metabolism is not working properly. And this is not only affecting fertile women before menopause, but also after menopause, still some hormones play very important roles. And for this purpose, you need good enough levels of insulin, of thyroid hormone. And if women go on very low carbohydrate diets, like a keto diet, for long periods of time, usually they mess up their thyroid metabolism, they mess up their insulin metabolism, and further along also their hormone metabolism. And because of that, carbohydrates are basically not a bad food, but most of us are getting too many carbohydrates. And for that purpose, a 16-8 fast is often a good solution. But why, in our practice, do we recommend to fast for 13 and not for 16 or 18 hours? This is due to the fact once you have used up your stored carbohydrates, once your glycogen storage is cleared, your body needs to keep maintaining the glucose metabolism. And I've been working for long years in emergency medicine and in intensive care medicine, and I can tell you, the only moment a human's blood sugar is going to drop to really low, next to zero, is the moment people die. You don't want to go there. And your liver knows that. So for that purpose, your liver tries to keep the blood sugar level stable. And I'm going to teach you an easy test of how you can find out if it's still a good idea to let your liver do that, or if you should continue to eat. Now, if people are like overfat and like have triglycerides like sky high levels, triglycerides build up in your body if you eat more carbohydrates than you burn, then these things might not apply. But I'm talking about most of our patients who just want to maintain their health, get a bit healthier, and often basically want to manage their weight, lose a few pounds. But we're not talking about like 50, 60, 70 pounds, but some weight loss. And for them, it's important to kind of not overdo fasting. Why? If your liver is more than full of glycogen, as just said, like you can go for like 24 hours on that. This might not be the case for our typical patients, because we teach patients to actually run triglyceride levels lower than 75. Well, that means for our typical patient, the storage period is more like 13, 14, 15 hours. And now you hear talking to me about these 13 hours. So the moment the glycogen has been purged and all the excessive calories, the excessive carbohydrates have been burnt, your liver would now need to let your adrenals know to produce specific stress hormones like norepinephrine, like cortisol, to now, on the one hand, assess your adipose tissue for more energy because the liver cannot provide any more because the carbohydrate reserve is gone. Plus, it needs cortisol to start the process of gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis is the term that describes your liver making new blood sugar, mainly out of protein, by the way. And cortisol, as you might know, is a stress hormone. And by the way, hair loss is closely linked to high levels of stress hormones. So you don't want to have high levels of cortisol. But if people think like they are going to do something really, really healthy and they're going to do like this 16, 18-hour fasting window every single day, after, for most people, maybe 13, maybe 15, maybe 17 hours, their liver storage is empty and their stress hormones kick in. And now the body actually gets stressed. I said your body is built for survival, so that's fine. But you don't want to go on that place on purpose, because if you are stressed, what is an antidote to stress? It's sugar. So your cravings for food are going to get more and more and more. So what we recommend to most people is, the moment you get up in the morning, you have been sleeping hopefully for about 8 hours and not been eating for maybe 11 hours, because we ask our patients to not eat about 3 hours prior to going to bed. We would ask you just to try to hold your hand and see if you can hold it still. Usually that should work. And now, please just repeat this test, maybe every half an hour or so. And there's going to be some point in time, maybe around noon, maybe in the early afternoon. For most people, it's after maybe 14, 15 hours, when you notice that your hand is now starting to shake a little bit. Why is it shaking? Because the stress hormones your adrenals are releasing to make the process of gluconeogenesis possible for your body are, as a side effect, making you shiver just a little bit. But this is a true sign that your body is obviously stressed. And you want to learn about this time frame. And it's an individual thing. So for some people it's longer, for some people it's shorter. But let's say you now know that after 14 hours of fasting, you start to shiver a bit. My recommendation is now reduce your habit of intermittent fasting to maybe 13.5 hours. So just a few minutes before you think the carbohydrate storage in your liver has been emptied, you should start to eat again. And your first meal should include some source of a carbohydrate. Now, I don't say go crazy on sugar. You don't need that. Sugar is usually not good for you in big amounts. But even just like a carrot is going to provide you some carbohydrates. It should just be enough to restabilize your blood sugar levels, because now your liver needs an exogenous source if you want to avoid gluconeogenesis, which in this case you really want to avoid. And just as a rough calculation, if you think about how much blood sugar a human has, if you kind of fingerpick yourself, it's going to give you a reading like 100 milligrams per deciliter of blood, which equals to 1 gram per 1 liter of blood. And let's say most people have maybe 5 liters of blood, maybe equaling 5 grams of blood sugar. So if you would be eating just 5 grams of sugar, or 5 grams of a carbohydrate, which in your body gets converted into glucose, which is sugar, that would be enough for your body to run on. So you see, you don't need big amounts of carbohydrates, but you need some. And if you would go on a protein-only meal, let's say you just have, a piece of steak or whatever, then unfortunately you cannot avoid the process of gluconeogenesis, because your body would then take a good part of this protein and convert it into sugars. And again, this is most likely not what you intend to do. So your first meal of the day should include some carbohydrates. Now, for example, how do I do that? Often in the morning, I've got 3 little kids, so I don't have too much time in the morning. Often I just have a cup of cottage cheese and like a small amount of jelly on it. That's it. And then I've got a small source of carbohydrates, mainly good protein. I'm going to also look for some good sources of fiber in my diet, but we are going to later talk about that. Next thing is, if you would stick to a habit of intermittent fasting, like now you have changed your 16-8 to maybe 14-10. The thing is, most of our patients are not going to get enough protein on such a diet. And protein is the main building block for the human body, including your skin, including your hair. And we usually do extensive blood work on all our patients every 3 months. And usually it takes us a year or 2 to bring patients to good protein levels. And if someone is just having like 1 or 2 meals a day, usually it's impossible to meet your protein requirement. Because as I said a couple of minutes ago, your body has no storage for protein. Your body can take up roughly about 20 grams of protein in a single meal. 20 grams of protein, for example, would be 1 cup of cottage cheese, or can be maybe 100 grams of meat or fish or whatever protein source you want to eat. And by the way, protein doesn't have to be animal-based, but we are later going to talk about that. Actually, nothing on earth wants to be eaten or doesn't want to be eaten, including plants. So most plants, which are protein-rich, and you eat them, actually feed you a toxin. And this toxin is responsible for lots of health issues. But coming back to this issue that most people are not getting enough protein, if you say like, we try to shoot for at least 1 gram of protein per kilogram of lean body weight, for most people, you would need at least 60, maybe 80 grams of protein in a day. And if you do the math, you quickly learn that you actually need 3 to 4 meals in 24 hours to be able to meet this protein requirement. If you say you can eat like 20 grams in a meal and then eat maybe 60 or 80 grams of protein in 24 hours, a lot of people need actually more. And how much blood testing is going to tell you that. Now, then you can quickly learn how on earth should I be able to do like a 14-10 fasting regime. What we teach our patients is the moment you get up in the morning, just have some plain protein, like for example, my cottage cheese, maybe with a small amount of carbohydrates. Because this protein, it would bake a long-term fast. Like if you do the 5-day fasting, you would have like that much protein, it would totally bake the fast. But for overnight fasting, for intermittent fasting, it's all about purging carbohydrates. And eating protein doesn't break this purge, doesn't break this fast. So I have a lot of patients asking about, like, can I have coffee in the morning? Yes, obviously. Can I have milk in my coffee? Yes, obviously. Can I have... Yes, you can do that. You should just make sure to not eat a lot of carbohydrates, depending on your goals, even some carbohydrates in the morning to allow for this time to burn calories. And if you're in for a weight loss, you also should not have too much fatty acids, because otherwise, when you feed yourself calories, you're not going to lose calories. But if you go after these two things, like not overdoing a fast and getting enough protein on intermittent fasting, then usually you get a lot of the upside and little of the downside. But if you overdo it, then expect the intermittent fasting to stress your body, and this is actually not what you want to do. Now, when we talk about, let's go back to eating, what would like good diet being composed of? And I have to tell you, like, there's just not one good diet, but there's general principles which usually hold true for most people. So if you look into what should a diet for healthy skin, healthy hair, and so on, you usually think from the field of longevity, what should a good diet provide you with? Then it's basically two things. One is the nutrients you need. We're talking about fiber, vitamins, minerals, some carbohydrates, protein, the right type of fatty acids. And more importantly, from my perspective, it should be as free of toxins as possible. Why? We have a lot of patients who ask us, like, can take this supplement, this medication, or whatever for longevity purposes. But if you think about health and longevity, the main purpose is you need to survive. If you run in front of a train when you're like really young, the chance for longevity is basically zero. And if you think about, usually I think of my terms of decades, but if you think about what's going to be happening in 20, 30, 40 years, that's important to do, because otherwise longevity is usually very hard to reach. But in the short term, you need to survive today and tomorrow and this year. And for that purpose, it's very important that the food which you eat, which you love, actually loves you back. Because if the food you eat provides you with the best nutrients, but also provides you with some toxins, then usually the net effect is negative and you don't want to go there. So if you look into what is a healthy diet for good hair, good hormone levels looking like, then yes, you need to watch all the micronutrients. For most women with hair loss, usually they have a low iron storage level. And if your storage iron, which is called ferritin, is sitting below 70 nanograms, then usually hair loss is very common. And yes, most lab companies say like 20 nanograms of ferritin is enough. But as I said, your body is built for survival. Building red blood cells is far more important than growing nice hair. And if your body detects like a low level of iron, it's going to shift all the iron to the important systems. Now there's a big caveat. If you go to your doctor's office, you get a blood draw done and they tell you like, you ask about it, we did it, we got your ferritin level, and your ferritin level is 80. And you say, all right, I cannot have any hair loss due to low iron. You need to understand that iron is not only playing a significant role for you, but also for bacteria. And your body is very prone to bacterial infections. And therefore, it has very strong defense systems against bacterial infections or whatever infections we are talking about. And your body knows bacteria need iron to thrive. So, if your body spots inflammation, it often equals inflammation with infection and therefore pulls iron out of the circulation, out of the system, and puts it into the ferritin storage, where the iron is inaccessible to bacteria, but also to you, and especially to your bone marrow, to your hair cells, and so on. So a good ferritin storage can also only be labeled as good if you also know that your inflammation levels are at zero. And when we, for example, look into a marker for inflammation like C-reactive protein, and your C-reactive protein is below 5, it doesn't tell you that it's 0. Most tests are actually not tailored to detect low levels of inflammation. But when we do run these tests, like TNF-alpha, like high sensitive C-reactive protein, then we often see that most people come to our practice as new patients actually suffer from chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is super, super common. And if we look into the underlying reasons, it's usually that people are eating the wrong foods. And what do I mean by the wrong foods? Because my kids at school are being told like, the more variation you have in your diet, the better. It's good to have a balanced diet. But as I initially said, basically nothing on earth wants to be eaten, with the exception of some ripe fruit and some mushrooms. If you try to eat an animal, it's usually going to either attack you, hide, run away. But here it's like obvious that an animal doesn't want to get eaten. If you have ever watched a video clip of a monkey trying to open a coconut, you also know that most hard shell nuts, for example, also obviously don't want to get eaten, because usually if the monkey tries to open the coconut wins, not the monkey. But in case the monkey is able to kind of crack the coconut open, then usually the inside is not toxic. The same is true like if you try to pick blackberries. Anything that has kind of spikes on it. Like you try to pick that, you hurt yourself, you learn, okay, these berries are made for birds, not for me. But once you overcome the defense mechanism of a plant, then obviously most foods are not toxic. But whenever you eat the hull of, especially vegetables, or the seeds of it, then these plants contain specific toxins. We're talking about things like tannins, oxalates, but especially lectins. And most people actually, if you have never heard of a lectin, if you would go to your grandmother and you would say, dear grandmother, I found like green beans in my garden. Could I eat those? The grandmother would say, oh no, they are toxic. You need to cook them before you can eat it. And this is how traditional food preparation is actually working. And I usually tell my patients, I'm located in Europe, so if it would be like 700 years back in time, before America was discovered, and you would just go into any German town and say, okay, go to the guest house and request something to eat, what would you get? You would then usually get a piece of pork, and the pork would have been fed with everything from the leftovers, and everything of that would have obviously been organic because herbicides and pesticides would not have been discovered yet. You would have got some vegetables from the garden, and these would usually have been cooked for a long period of time because the detoxification process. And as a carbohydrate, you would have been either given a bowl of millet, because millet is the traditional gluten and lectin-free grain in Europe, or you would have been given sourdough bread. But it would not be compared to today's standard, because today you get like sourdough bread, which has like 20% of sourdough in it and 80% of whole grains, and these whole grains have quite a lot of lectins. So you would have gotten like sourdough bread being fermented for maybe 48 hours to detoxify it. But in the modern world, we have kind of picked up a lot of different good tasting recipes from all over the world, and unfortunately not learned about the anti-nutrients in it. Now, the anti-nutrients, for example, like lectins, only about 30% of foods contain a lectin, but this is major foods we are eating. We're talking about gluten-containing grains, we're talking about lentils, things like soybeans, peas. We are talking about nightshades like bell peppers, tomatoes, potatoes, everything which has not been there before the discovery of America. And remember, like our genes, humans who look like us, are walking on planet Earth for maybe 2 million years. And people who are kind of intelligent enough to teach them English, teach them how to use a computer, they exist for roughly about 200,000 years. And for this period of time, people have been exposed to like a lot of different plants and learned of how to deal with that. But since America has only been discovered since 1492, our genes mostly have not recognized that they are these novel foods which carry kind of a lot of lectins. And last but not least, things like squashes and cucumbers also contain lectins. And if you go into kind of the traditional places in Europe where these foods are being eaten at least for a couple of 100 years, for example, you go to Italy and you look over the shoulder of a pasta cook. You're going to see if they prepare their pasta sauce. They're going to peel and seed the tomatoes, because peeling the seeding removes most of the lectins from tomatoes. If you ask the chef, why do you peel the tomatoes? He would maybe say, only a barbarian is not going to peel their tomatoes. But he's most likely not going to know just because of their tradition, they do that. Same is true for the people in Spain who peel their almonds, or people in southern France who are going to peel and de-seed their cucumbers before they put it on a salad niçoise. But these foods being exported internationally, most people have dislearned of how to detoxify it. And for most people who see the effect of this chronic inflammation, these foods are unfortunately playing a major role. And when we detect that, and we either teach patients of how to properly prepare lectin-containing foods by maybe pressure cooking it, or peeling, de-seeding it, depending on the type of food, a lot of different things are possible to detoxify it. You can often keep eating these foods, or in the case, for example, of gluten-containing grains, you can find a lot better alternatives. For example, things like cassava-based or millet-based breads and all that stuff. So it's actually possible to find good alternatives. And then we usually see inflammation markers of patients going down, iron deficiency now revealing. And once we are able to rebalance that by feeding people the foods which actually nurture them, which provide them with all the macronutrients they need, then we usually see after 5, 6, 7 months, this is how long hair takes to regrow, and then they report back to us, okay, now finally my hair thicker, things are getting stable again in my body. And therefore, our main idea is we want not to see like what additional things do you need in your life. Like the idea that a headache is the absence of aspirin. We actually think about, okay, what could be the things hurting you which we might need to take away first. And if we do that, then usually a lot of good things happen for our patients. So when we talk about, for example, coming back to the beginning of my talk, fasting, it's less about how long can you fast. It's more about how can you fast in a way that you're not going to hurt your body. And if you start eating again, what can you eat to also not hurt your body? And maybe look into the scientific basis for that. I mean, like, for example, lectins have been known for since the 1970s. And this is like nothing new, but unfortunately it has not made its way into the medical schools of this world. And therefore most doctors unfortunately don't know about it. But since most cultures know about it, we can just look around and gather this knowledge. I remember we have, in my practice, we treat a lot of expat patients speaking English living in Europe. And I remember this American patients being born in Guatemala. And I tell her like, okay, it's the black beans you're eating, which are responsible for your hair loss and for your weight gain. And she's like, that cannot be true. I've been raised on black beans. And I'm like, okay, let's dive into that. How did you eat your black beans when you were a child? And she goes like, okay, with my grandmother, I went on the market and we bought the black beans, and then we sat down on the table and we sorted out the bad beans. It was like, okay, they were bad beans. She was like, yeah, obviously they were bad beans. I said, okay, what did you do next? Yeah, grandmother cooked that, and they cooked that for 3 days. And she said, I cannot eat from the black beans before the 3 days are over. I said, okay. And how did you prepare your black beans today? She says, I'm going to microwave it for 2 minutes. And that's the main point for most people, that it's not that beans would be bad for you, but wrong preparation of beans is certainly not good for you. And these are things which are basically easy to do, like rinse these beans overnight, like your grandmother would have done it, put it in a pressure cooker. And most people on the 2 generations before me used to own a pressure cooker. And often they would tell you like, this was for energy purposes, to save energy. But actually it was also acquired ancient knowledge of how to detoxify food. And basically all that comes down to gut health, because if you would be eating a food which you are reacting to, which you might have a food sensitivity or allergy to, usually you have gut level inflammation. And since a couple of years, gut level inflammation is known to be one of the hallmarks of aging. So if you are still thinking about what did you tell me? Can I do anything practical from this talk? I mean, like, remember, I taught you do things like holding your hand to make sure that you're not shivering when you do like a long-term fast, and all the things. But if you want to ask, okay, is this lacting thing something affecting me, yes or no? One of the easiest tests is ask yourself, how much toilet paper do you need? And if you find out that you need more than about 1 or 2 pieces of toilet paper, then usually it's a good idea to do a gut microbiome test and learn about the levels of inflammation, obviously, then present in your gut, learn about the disbalance of your gut microbiome. But again, if you have that, don't look into what probiotics do I need to take to heal that? Because a few milligrams of a probiotic are usually not going to do the trick. Think about, okay, what's hurting me? And if you eat like grams and grams and grams of, for example, lectin-containing proteins, which maybe don't love you back, then usually the key is to take this away and not put like one probiotic supplement on your list of supplements and think this is going to heal you. So if you just follow this basic advice, I mean, like sometimes hair loss is a bit more complicated, like certain hormonal pathways where like things are getting converted into testosterone, and you get, even as a woman, dihydrotestosterone, which is leading to male pattern hair loss. Yes, that's all too. But in medicine, common things are common. And since we know that most of our patients actually don't have enough protein, don't have enough iron, and have chronic inflammation in their system, this is usually the first place to start. So if you want to learn more about the details, we do have a longevity book, and I invite you to look into that. And I think as a promotion, we are going to give this, if you follow the instructions, directly after you see this talk. We are going to give the ebook version of that free away for a few days. So be quick to save your copy. But if you want to dive deeper into that, my longevity book, see the cover here, that's usually the next good resource to go. And remember, in the morning when you're fasting, hold your hand. In the afternoon, test again, find out when do you start to shiver. And for your gut health, look into your usage of toilet paper. Okay, hope that you learned some interesting things on this talk, and wishing you all the best. And hopefully we are going to see you getting your free copy of my longevity book. And I hope this is going to teach you even more interesting things. Take care. Goodbye.